Chapter 1. Mudblood, but you call everyone like me that, Severus. What makes me any different? At the entrance of Gryffindor Tower, Severus Snape blinked hard. He had just seen a girl with a pair of sparkling green eyes. She cast him a contemptuous glance, turned her back, and climbed through the portrait hole. A thick wooden board slammed shut right in front of him, covering the entrance. On the board, a plump woman yawned impatiently. All right, back to your dormitory," the fat lady mumbled drowsily. "Students shouldn't be wandering the halls at this hour." Wait, how did I end up here? A sudden, searing pain ripped through Snape's head, as if his skull were being split in two. His vision blurred. With a heavy thud, he collapsed to his knees, elbows braced against the floor, trembling violently. Chaotic memories churned in his mind. Spinner's End, Hogwarts, spells flying through the air, Lily Evans. The flashes came like shattered pieces of a puzzle, unfamiliar yet intimate, each sharp as a blade, slicing his head apart. He didn't know how long it lasted, but finally the pain began to ebb. Weakly, he lifted his head and realized the truth of his situation. He had transmigrated, and this was Gryffindor Tower. The girl who had just left was Lily Evans. And his identity now was Severus Snape. As he sorted the tangle of thoughts and memories colliding in his mind, one fact became painfully clear. Earlier this very afternoon, after the OWL exams, humiliated by James Potter, he had lashed out and called Lily that unforgivable word. Moments ago, he had still been making his final, desperate defense. But obviously, he had failed. According to the story as it was written, this was the breaking point, Snape and Lily parting ways forever. "Lily," he whispered softly, "how did it come to this?" Two emotions warred violently in his chest. Knowing how things would end, he even felt an impulse to barge straight into Gryffindor dormitory and explain himself to her. But another voice told him if he really did that, it would only make things worse. Even now, those bright green eyes were growing hazy in his mind. He could no longer tell what his feelings for Lily truly were. Was it love? He wasn't sure. Was it desire? He didn't know. The past felt both painfully close and unbearably distant. Under the dim torchlight flickering against the stone walls of the corridor, Snape staggered toward the marble staircase. Not long ago, he had been happily playing Hogwarts Legacy at home. He had only been pausing for a moment, taking a break from running his fifth-year transfer student all over the map, casting spells at everything in sight. Just to put a couple drops of eye drops in his dry eyes. Who could have imagined, with a blink, he would end up here, at Hogwarts, in the summer of 1976. Instinctively skipping the vanishing step, he slumped against the stone staircase, trying to piece together the flood of tangled memories. "I haven't called home in over a week. My monthly report still isn't done. What should I do from here on?" The silence pressed down on him until he could hardly breathe. But looking on the bright side, after a long time, he finally reached into his robes and pulled out a wand of ebony wood with a dragon heartstring core. With a gentle flick, the tip emitted a thin beam of light. "Magic." Staring at the wavering glow, Severus Snape murmured wearily. "Well, here I am. From today onward, I'll be the new half-blood prince." Knox. The glow at the wand's tip vanished at once. He pulled up the sleeve of his left arm and checked. Thankfully, the dark mark had not yet been branded there. Deeper and deeper he went, down beneath the castle, until he reached a bare, damp stone wall. He bowed his head in thought, then recalled, the new password this week was pureblood forever. Pureblood forever. Wasn't Tom Riddle himself a half-blood? Snape rolled his eyes at the blank wall. At his whispered words, the concealed stone door slowly swung open. He descended the spiral staircase, lined with tapestries. The Slytherin common room was a long, low underground chamber. The walls and ceiling were built from rough stone, round lamps. Glowing with eerie green light, dangled on chains from above. Even in summer, the chamber was chill. In front of an ornate carved mantelpiece, a fire crackled and popped. The warm red glow of the flames mingled with the lamp's green light, casting shadows over several Slytherin students lounging in carved armchairs. Among them, besides a few younger students, Snape spotted one of his roommates, Patrick Abbott. Sitting alone, Patrick was hunched under the lamplight, absorbed in a thick, leather-bound tome, Advanced Rune Translations. Patrick had never shown the slightest interest, indeed, outright disgust, for the so-called jokes Mulciber and Avery liked to play on Muggle-born students. And because of that, he had never treated Snape kindly either. As a pure-blood Slytherin from one of the Sacred 28, Patrick's attitude was unusual, to say the least. Ignoring the curious glances of others, Snape walked straight toward the boys' dormitory, then slipped into the washroom. The silver lamps in the washroom glowed the same shade of dark green. Lake water lapped softly against the window at the far end. Occasionally, huge shadows glided past outside. Snape studied the new face in the mirror and muttered under his breath. How is this black? Why'd they cast a black guy to play him? James might be a cunt, but you can't just accuse him of being racist. The reflection showed a body thin but still wiry enough. His skin, however, was deathly pale, like a plant raised entirely in darkness. His straight, greasy black hair framed his face. His nose was long and hooked, jutting sharply downward. Suddenly, the humiliation from earlier in the day surged back uncontrollably in his mind. The beech tree, boredom, Snivelus, choking soap bubbles, robes dragged through the dirt, the cheers and laughter of the crowd. Stinking little mudblood. His breathing shook beyond control. His facial muscles felt numb, his eyes brimming with fury. In that daze, his reflection in the mirror seemed to blend into the figure standing before it. Slowly, Snape lifted his wand. One hand swept back his hair, the other guided the wand tip, tracing lightly along the strands in the lamplight. Locks of hair drifted down. Black eyes locked onto black eyes as Snape muttered softly to himself. James Potter, things between us are far from over. Chapter 2. After a careful wash, Snape returned to the dormitory. Avery and Mulciber had their arms and legs hanging out of their blankets, mouths open, snoring in chorus. "Two idiots," he muttered under his breath, pulling out his wand and flicking it toward his own four-poster bed. Muffliato. Thinking about how the original purpose of this spell had been simply to let himself sleep through the snoring, he almost found it comical. He tossed his dirty clothes into the empty laundry basket and lay down on his pillow. Tomorrow I still have to go to the Hog's Head for the Walpurgis meeting," he sighed heavily, rifling through his memories. That's nothing but the Death Eater's reserves. Gazing into the darkness, the faintly visible green and silver striped curtains before him, and accompanied by the strange buzzing sound in his ears. He tried alternating between calling out System and Old Grandpa in both Chinese and English. No answer came. Eventually, Snape drifted off into sleep. The next morning, Snape woke early. After a moment's thought, he pulled his trunk from beneath the bed. There weren't many clothes inside. Scattered among them were a set of old gobstones and a few of the books his mother had passed down. Among them was Advanced Potion Making by Libadius Borage, smudged with grime, its corners curled from constant use. He fished out an ill-fitting pair of tattered jeans and put them on under his robes. Normally, Snape never wore such ugly Muggle clothes at Hogwarts. But for safety's sake, if the marauders ambushed him, at least they would provide another layer of cover. The rustling woke the others. Avery stared, mouth agape, rubbing his eyes in disbelief as he glanced at Snape, then shook his head. "Get dressed, let's go to breakfast." Snape saw exactly what Avery was curious about, but he had no desire to discuss it. On the way, more and more people pointed at him, whispering and occasionally chuckling under their breath. He nearly lost control, tempted to fling a few Avada Kedavra curses just to make them all spit blood. Hidden beneath his sleeve, he gave his wand a few discreet flicks and whispered, "Langluck." The whispers choked off at once. Several students clutched their throats, tongues glued to the roofs of their mouths, unable to speak. Finally, the world was quiet. When he sat down, Snape piled pork chops, beef, and lamb onto his plate. As he chewed, he thought, "The house elves' cooking really is excellent. I should eat more meat and find some way to get stronger. But the most urgent thing right now is getting off Tom's ship before it inevitably sinks, whether it's a double agent or a two-faced spy. None of them have ever met a good end." Besides, I have no intention of babysitting someone for 7 years, only to die and have my secrets shouted to the entire school by Potter's brat. Walpurgis reserves shouldn't be a one-way trip like the full-fledged Death Eaters. That might be a problem. At this point, Voldemort should still have only 5 Horcruxes: the diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, and the diadem. Nagini and Harry haven't yet had the honor. Chewing slowly, Snape's gaze drifted up to the staff table at the far end of the Great Hall. Behind half-moon glasses, a pair of brilliant blue eyes met his for the briefest second. Snape shuddered violently, a cold sweat breaking out at once. Quickly, he dropped his gaze, focusing on his plate, snatching up his knife to pretend to cut into his steak. Damn, almost forgot that part. Thankfully, I should already know occlumency, though I'm not sure if last night's ordeal left any traces. I'll need to find a chance to test it. Outside the castle, the crimson sun lit up the grounds. A breeze swept across the treetops of the Forbidden Forest, scattering patches of deep green light. Argus Filch stood just inside the front gates with a long roll of parchment, checking faces one by one, making sure no one slipped out who wasn't allowed. A group of students passed through, walking between the high stone pillars topped with winged boars, then turned left toward the path to Hogsmeade. They followed the road, and when they reached Zonko's joke shop, Mulciber decided to stock up on dung bombs and prank supplies. Though uninterested, Snape decided it was better not to separate from the others. So he lingered in the shade by the door, passing time while flocks of owls of all sizes and colors flew in and out of the post office nearby. "Look who it is," Mulciber said, coming out of the shop with Avery, a large paper bag in his arms. Lily Evans and her roommate Mary MacDonald were walking lightly down the path, chatting happily. Perfect time to test out the new toys. Mulciber reached into the paper bag and pulled out a dung bomb. Just as he raised it to throw, Snape instinctively drew his wand. Pratigo. An invisible shield sprang up instantly, knocking Avery and Mulciber flat on their backs. Dung bombs, stink pellets, and fizzing whizbees tumbled everywhere, scattering across the ground. Snape stared in shock at his own hand, as though the motion hadn't been his at all. But what was done was done. "The hell are you doing?" Covered in dust, the two scrambled back to their feet, glaring at Snape from the other side of the shield. "Severus, are you insane?" "Don't touch them, all right." "What? You'd stand up for those mud?" "Don't say that word," Snape shouted. His lowered arm rose again, wand pointed firmly at them. Avery and Mulciber had drawn theirs too. 2 against 1, but neither looked eager to make the first move. "Listen, Severus, don't forget who you are." "I don't need you to remind me, Mulciber." The sun had climbed nearly overhead. The heavy air seemed to congeal, clinging sticky against their skin. A breeze swept from behind Snape, and a familiar figure emerged through the shimmering heat to stand beside him. Mary walked up and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. He had never expected anyone to step up and stand by his side, and certainly not Mary. What a good girl, Snape thought. Even after all the times his crowd had tormented her with dark magic, she had still been willing to pass messages for him to Lily. And now she was here, standing beside him. Lily joined her then, stepping up to Mary's side. Snape instinctively averted his eyes, refusing to look at her. "Mulciber, are you sure you want to cross wands with me?" Snape didn't truly want to tear things open here, so he made a show of lowering his wand. Mulciber shot him a hateful glare, then dragged Avery off, hastily gathering the scattered items before leaving in a rush. "Thank you, Mary," Snape said uncertainly. Mary gave him a small nod and turned away. Even after Mary and Lily had walked far off, Snape remained rooted to the spot. The Hogshead, go or not to go, that was the question. Chapter 3. Snape decided he would still make a trip to the Hogshead. Not for any particular reason, if blame were to be laid. It was on Voldemort for having thrown the wizarding world into utter chaos. In the original course of events, the casualty rate among their generation had been far too high. Lily himself, Regulus Black, Remus Lupin, Sirius Black, James Potter, Peter Pettigrew, Barty Crouch Jr., Bellatrix Lestrange. Both sides, light and dark, were nearly wiped out. Even Gilderoy Lockhart, that useless junior, ended up a patient in St. Mungo's hospital for magical maladies and injuries, sharing the same ward with Frank and Alice Longbottom. When he thought about it, it seemed that only the Malfoy family, who could barely scrape together one intact wand between them, managed to survive wholly intact. In his previous life, as a veteran Potterhead, there was no way he would sit back and do nothing now. If he didn't stir up this world himself, turning it upside down, and didn't stick the charging plug straight into Tom Brand's two-pronged socket, wouldn't that be a wasted trip? Therefore, a day without Voldemort was the best kind of day. Now was not yet the time to cut ties with the Death Eaters completely. Other than the ring buried in the ruins of the Gaunt Shack and the diadem hidden in the Room of Requirement, he did not know the whereabouts of the other Horcruxes. Turning into a narrow alley beside the post office, Snape saw a shabby little pub. The tavern's weathered wooden sign hung on a rusted iron bracket above the doorframe. On the sign was painted the severed head of a wild boar, blood seeping through the white cloth that wrapped it. Whenever the wind blew, the sign let out a creaking groan. Snape pushed open the door. A broad beam of dust-filled sunlight sliced the room in half. With a creak, the door swung shut again, and the sunlight instantly disappeared. His pupils dilated rapidly as he tried to adjust to the gloom. It was a small, dark room. Thick grime coated the mullioned windows, blocking most of the light. A few stubby, half-melted candles flickered on rough wooden tables. The entire place reeked heavily of mutton. Aside from several Hogwarts students huddled at a table farthest from the bar, most of the patrons wore hoods. Avery, Mulciber, along with Regulus and Little Crouch, were among them. He had once ceremoniously gifted the Death Eaters the Muffliato spell. That way, even in the Hogshead, they had no need to worry about eavesdropping. As Snape arrived, the indistinct buzzing voices from that table suddenly cut off. Amidst the gathering, a hooded woman tilted her chin, lounging lazily in a battered armchair with the air of someone reclining on a throne. "What are you doing here?" "I've come for our shared purpose." "You still have the guts to come here." The woman sneered, her lips curling with disdain, eyes half-lidded. "How am I to take that, Bellatrix?" "How are you to take that?" Bellatrix suddenly cackled, repeating Snape's words in a shrill voice. She leapt to her feet and strode toward Snape, locking eyes with him. "Little Save, your friends tell me that, compared to them, you seem to prefer those stinking little mudbloods." "Compared to everything foul-smelling, yes, that includes the two of them." Snape studied Bellatrix's striking face with an amused gaze. "It seems I've only just realized that there are better, purer, and far more appealing things in this world." A peal of manic laughter cut him off. Bellatrix looked deranged, laughing so hard she nearly doubled over. "Ah, Little Save." She tucked a few sleek strands of black hair behind her ear, wiping at the corner of her eye with the back of her hand. "I never would have thought it, so you like older girls, but you've come a bit late." "Yes, I regret that. Lucius told me you and Rodolphus had a wedding a few months ago." Bellatrix gave a soft, dismissive snort, her lips twisting into a mocking sneer. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Why mention that fool?" "I'm glad we can agree on that much." Snape gave a short, hoarse laugh, his voice low as he continued, "But compared to his stupidity, I clearly envy his luck more." "Is that so? Too bad that, compared with Lestrange, what you have to envy is not just his luck, Snape." Bellatrix pronounced his surname with deliberate emphasis, her tongue flicking against her thin lips as she locked eyes with him. "Your recent changes are truly startling." In that instant, Snape felt her icy gaze boring into his pupils like an awl, probing like a snake flicking its tongue at its prey. But this time, he felt strangely detached, as though a transparent curtain separated him from the serpent. It almost seemed like he could choose which thoughts to show her. Images flashed through his mind like scenes on a film reel. The Marauder's attacks, suffocating humiliation, a girl's scornful glance. Strands of hair falling in a mirror, Bellatrix's beautiful face, a flicker of possessive desire. "Enough!" Snape growled in a low, furious voice, staggering backward a few steps and knocking over a chair. "Bellatrix, enough. How dare you? How can you?" He took a deep breath and spoke in a low, trembling voice, his head lowered to avoid her eyes. "Be silent, Severus." Bellatrix dropped lazily back into her armchair, resuming her indolent pose. "Sit down and stow those filthy thoughts. Loyalty to the master will earn you rewards beyond the wildest dreams of any wizard." Her gaze swept the circle. "The same goes for all of you. The master does not overlook any loyal servant, to ensure you can better serve the master in the future. Let us return to today's lesson. Since you have all completed your 5th year of studies, I will help lay the foundation for your 6th year. Today, we will learn the use of the 3 unforgivable curses. Afterward, you can find chances to practice them yourselves." The candles on the table burned steadily downward, their flames shifting from yellow to a deep orange red. When the gathering ended, Snape deliberately lingered behind. "As for the Dark Lord's rewards, Bellatrix," he asked cautiously, "I have heard that for particularly faithful servants, the Dark Lord grants them special rewards." Snape's tone was tinged with fear, but also with a trace of greed. "Do you know what those special rewards might be?" Bellatrix reacted as though struck by a nerve. Her ears flushed pink, and in a voice pitched higher than her lecture, she snapped. "The master will see in time. I am his most faithful and most reliable servant. As a proud and noble Black, your loyalty is naturally beyond doubt." Snape quickly made a parting gesture, then turned and left the pub. Thankfully, Bellatrix's obsession with pureblood supremacy was so deeply ingrained. Otherwise, today might truly have been dangerous. Someday, he would make this madwoman kneel at his feet. Unfortunately, his risky venture had not yielded good news. Helga Hufflepuff's cup, at this point in time, should not yet have been hidden within the Lestrange family vault. After making his way back to the castle and eating supper in the Great Hall, Snape returned to his dormitory. His freshly laundered clothes were already neatly folded at the foot of his bed. Chapter 4. The next morning, as the air around him gave a faint ripple, Snape swung his wand to dispel the array of charms layered over his 4-poster bed. The all-round protection charm and the safeguarding charm. Today was yet another sunny and beautiful day. In the Great Hall, the enchanted ceiling was clear and pure, as blue as the petals of a cornflower. He decided he would properly enjoy this first leisurely Sunday after the OWL exams. Naturally, a fine day ought to begin with good food. Just as Snape filled a plate with bacon, ham, and sausages, preparing to dig in, Patrick Abbott sat down across from him. "You need to eat some vegetables too. That's good for your health." As he spoke, Abbott added some cauliflower and cabbage onto his own plate. "Mary told me this. She said that Muggles have whole fields of study about healthy eating. If you only eat meat, you'll get sick." Snape was somewhat surprised. In all of 5th year, Abbott had never spoken so many words to him combined. Thank you." He had actually forgotten about balanced nutrition, with his whole mind bent only on eating meat to grow stronger. "You." "That's what Mary told me too. Yesterday was really surprising." Abbott held his fork, and when he saw the puzzled expression on Snape's face, he added, "I'm just curious, why did you do that? It didn't seem like you at all." Snape cursed silently. Why did everyone have to care so much about details? Why wasn't there a single fool? He set down his knife and said, "What happened by the lake the other day, I suppose you know." Seeing Abbott nod, Snape continued in his usual flat tone, "That was not a pleasant experience. Afterward, I thought for a long time, I cannot tolerate even more unpleasant things happening, whether to me or to anyone else. I have made mistakes before, but I want to change, not to continue as I was." Snape turned one palm upward in a small gesture toward Abbott. "I suppose you don't have any reason to refuse someone the chance to change for the better, do you?" "Well," Abbott said awkwardly, "Severus, I suppose not. That's good. I was just a little surprised, that's all." "But Abbott," Snape added some vegetables to his plate as well, "are you very close with Mary? Why do you care about these things?" At that, Abbott seemed to blush slightly. "Oh, she's my friend." "Yes, of course." Snape took a long gulp of pumpkin juice, a faint smile on his face. "She's a very kind girl." After eating his fill, he planned to go for a walk around the grounds. Considering his other 2 friends clearly would no longer accompany him, he turned to Abbott. "Want to walk the grounds with me? On such a sunny day, we ought to be outside." The gentle sunlight bathed the lawns, surrounded by relaxed students. Some lay sprawled in the grass sunbathing, others chatted cheerfully in small groups, and some sat in the shade of trees reading books and papers. Thin wisps of smoke drifted from the chimney of a small hut in the distance, dispersing over the dark green canopy of the forbidden forest. The two of them strolled slowly downhill, blades of grass rippling like waves under their feet. "Severus." Abbott noticed how Snape deliberately kept his steps away from the lakeside and couldn't help but speak. "I mean, since you've changed so much, maybe you could try to make peace with Potter and—" "No," Snape stopped walking, turned, and faced Abbott coldly. "No, Abbott. I can choose to change myself, but that does not mean I have to change for the sake of other people's mistakes. Neither I nor anyone else deserves to be treated like that. In this, Potter is no different from Avery and Mulciber. Would you try to persuade Mary to reconcile with them?" Flustered and nervous, Abbott stammered, Sorry, Severus. That wasn't what I meant, I only." His voice grew quieter and quieter. Snape suddenly turned and walked toward the lake. Abbott hurried after him. The lake and the sky seemed to merge into one, both a pale blue tinged with violet light. A giant squid lay lazily in the warm shallows, basking in the sun, while a few students swam in the lake accompanied by the great creature. Keeping up his pace, Snape's voice floated back over his shoulder. "Let's stay by the lake for a while." He crouched down, gently brushing one of the squid's tentacles with his fingers, then glanced sideways at his companion. "Why are you in Slytherin, Abbott? I don't see any Slytherin traits in you." "Oh," Abbott crouched down beside him, "I'm pureblood. My whole family is pureblood." Gazing at the pearly surface of the lake, Abbott continued almost as if talking to himself. "My grandfather and father both told me I was destined to be in Slytherin. Though the Sorting Hat did recommend me for other houses, I told it I wanted Slytherin, and it respected my choice." "Was that your choice?" Abbott sighed. "I know what you mean, maybe not. But the Sorting Hat never suggested Gryffindor, and I didn't have enough courage to refuse Slytherin." Together, they stared silently at the clear, blue lake. A sudden image arose in Snape's mind. Professor McGonagall, stern-faced, holding a roll of parchment, calling out the very first name. "Hannah Abbott." A girl with 2 golden pigtails stumbled out of the line and sat on the tall stool. A patched, tattered wizard's hat was lowered onto her head. After a short pause, the hat cried, "Hufflepuff." For the first time in a long while, Snape felt genuine happiness, and so he chuckled to himself. "If you ever have a child, you must respect her right to make her own choice." "I think I would," Abbott replied, then asked in puzzlement, "But why her?" "Who knows?" Snape burst out laughing and stood up. "Abbott, I think Hufflepuff would have suited you better. By the way, the spell that lets you hang someone upside down is Levicorpus. The counterspell is Liberacorpus. It's a non-verbal spell." Abbott struggled to stand, his legs numb from crouching. "Ouch, why are you telling me this?" "Just in case." Another one of those odd remarks. "Come on, let's head back. It's nearly mealtime." Chapter 5. The remaining days slipped quickly by, in the company of sunshine and drifting clouds. Soon, the students welcomed the last day of the winter term. Snape packed all his belongings in about 10 minutes. What took him the longest was, after half a day of fruitless attempts with his wand, finally having to dig out an inkwell and, frowning, use a quill to heavily blot out the words he had once scrawled on the back cover of Advanced Potion Making. This book belongs to the Half-Blood Prince. Abbott, however, had a mountain of things to sort. Just his various sets of dress robes for different occasions numbered several. And clearing out his wardrobe took nearly an hour. "So many clothes, do you ever wear them all?" Snape smacked his lips in faint amazement. By the time the two of them hurried to the Great Hall for the end-of-year feast, it was already packed with people. The entire hall was newly decorated in Hufflepuff's yellow and black. On the wall behind the staff table hung an enormous banner with the Hufflepuff badger emblazoned on it. Thanks to their unexpected and brilliant performance in the Quidditch Cup, Hufflepuff had, for the first time in 5 years, won the House Cup. Their table was therefore the most boisterous, everyone chattering, cheering, and celebrating. Moments later, as the professors took their seats, the noise gradually subsided. Another wonderful year has passed. Dumbledore rose to his feet, the twinkle in his eyes shining behind his half-moon spectacles. Let us all congratulate Hufflepuff. He gave a wave of his hand, and in front of each student appeared a notice. A reminder once again, all students under 17 are strictly forbidden from using magic during the holidays. Well, that's all the important matters. Let the feast begin. Before Snape, plates and goblets instantly brimmed with a dazzling variety of food and drink, and all kinds of sweets, licorice wands, fizzing Whizbees, Drooble's best blowing gum, pear drops. The next morning, more than 100 horseless carriages were waiting outside the castle. As always, they were responsible for ferrying second years, and above between Hogwarts and Hogsmeade Station. Snape, Abbott, and 2 younger students boarded one carriage. Soon the wheels beneath them began to creak and rattle as they turned. As the Hogwarts Express rumbled through forests, fields, and lakes, the countryside outside the window grew tidier and tidier. Snape's feelings grew more complicated. He even lost all interest in cauldron cakes. Truth be told, he didn't really want to go back. He did not know in what state of mind he could return to the home in his memories, nor with what attitude he could face the parents in those same memories. He even considered finding some random place to stay for 2 months, until September came and he could return to Hogwarts again. But his intuition told him that certain matters had to be resolved. The train whistle blew as it began to slow. When it finally clattered to a halt at platform 9, just as he remembered, he dragged his trunk off the train. After waving goodbye to Abbott, he turned and merged into the noisy, jostling crowd, heading toward the enchanted brick wall. Sunlight shone down on the street. On the other side, no one was waiting for him. A massive chimney rose into Snape's view. Black, murky river water gurgled beside him. His trunk rattled over the cobblestone street with a clattering sound. Snape slowly came to a halt outside a shabby brick house. From the crack of a downstairs curtain glowed the faint yellow of lamplight. After a moment, Snape fumbled in his pocket, produced a ring of keys, and opened the door with one. With a creak, he saw a woman who looked very much like him, only older. She was small and thin, her face sallow, her hair in disarray. Hearing the noise, the woman paused her mending work and lifted her swollen eyes toward the doorway. "You're back," her voice was hollow. Snape's lips worked soundlessly for a few moments, but he couldn't bring himself to say the word. "Where is he?" Snape asked. "Out," the woman murmured in a flat tone. "Out," a surge of nameless anger welled up in Snape. The woman shook her head in quiet sorrow, her gaze tinged with fear as it met his. Her eyes were like a bucket of cold water poured over Snape's heart. He suddenly felt a pang of misery. "I'm sorry." Snape steadied his heaving chest, forcing his breathing under control. "Have you eaten?" the woman asked. Without waiting for an answer, she set down her needlework on the wooden table and went toward the kitchen door. A few minutes later, she returned, carrying on a tray a bowl of boiled potatoes and a small dish of parsnip root sauce. She placed the tray on the wobbly table and signaled with her eyes for Snape to come eat. The room fell quiet, broken only by the faint sound of chewing. "Why has it come to this?" he asked softly. "You're a witch." The woman lowered her head slightly, twisting the hem of her clothes unconsciously in her hands, like a child caught in wrongdoing. "I've already been here for more than 10 years. But you and I, we can change, can't we?" "He doesn't like magic." Her voice was so low it was almost inaudible. "He doesn't really like anything. All these years, you've never used magic. Do you not wish to be a witch anymore?" She faltered, unable to give a complete reply. Snape looked at her. The anger within him had already been replaced by some indescribable emotion. He did not want to reproach her. He did not believe these things had arisen chiefly from her fault. Only the pitch-dark shadows continued to sway gently in the dim yellow lamplight. Bangs, bangs, bang. A sudden, violent knocking shattered the silence. Snape shot to his feet, his chair tilting back with him, its legs screeching against the worn floorboards. Hand gripping the knob, he turned it lightly. A hook-nosed man swayed on the doorstep, reeking of alcohol. Severus. The man squinted at him for a while, then slurred, "What are you doing here?" Snape let out a snickering laugh, his shoulders trembling with it. He found the scene so absurd it could fright a dozen boggarts into hiding inside a wardrobe. Hearing his laughter, the man's expression darkened instantly. He thrust out two grimy, massive hands and clamped them around Snape's throat. "Put it away." Seeing Snape draw his wand from the pocket of his jeans, the man bellowed like an enraged and filthy beast. "Filthy stick, don't think I don't know, you can't use it." In those black, hate-filled eyes, Snape seemed to see a frail and beaten woman trembling under shouts, and a black-haired boy curled in a corner, crying. Chapter 6. Even though he was struggling to breathe with fingers locked around his throat, the distorted laughter still burst uncontrollably from Snape's throat. He flung his wand aside, threw his head back, and smashed it forward against the man's nose. A sickening, brittle crack. "Oh yeah." The man screamed in agony. Blood gushed forth at once, flooding down his cheeks and staining his collar crimson. You little bastard." A flash of disbelief crossed the man's eyes, quickly consumed by a surge of violent rage. His fists pounded down on Snape like a hailstorm. Yet Snape wailed all the more frantically, his hands clutching the man's shoulders, dragging him down as they tumbled onto the floor in a frenzy of blows. Their bodies rolled across the wooden boards with heavy thuds. In the midst of the struggle, Snape sank his teeth deep into the man's neck. His jaws clamped down, fangs biting into flesh. "Ah, hiss." The man's scream turned into a strangled roar. His hands clawed at Snape's hair, trying to wrench him away. But Snape was like a hunting beast, unyielding, relentless, refusing to let go. Hot, brackish liquid surged into Snape's mouth and nose, its metallic sting cutting across his senses. The taste of blood spread across his tongue, searing his nerves, as though igniting a fire that could never be put out. "Aya." The man's struggles weakened, his movements faltering, the blood draining from his face. Snape released his jaws. The man clutched at the gaping wound in his neck, gasping helplessly. His legs kicked against the floorboards, convulsing, while a horrible rasp wheezed from his throat. His black eyes, once full of malice, now swam with desperate pleading. The fire was almost extinguished. The woman shrank against the corner of the wall, staring in horror at the two figures on the floor. Her hands covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Suddenly, as if struck by some thought, she scrambled frantically upstairs. When she returned to the living room, she was holding a stick. She had found her wand, dried and roughened from years of disuse. Ha. Snape knelt at the side, chest heaving violently. Blood dripped steadily from his chin onto the floor. The woman's face was pale as chalk. Trembling, she raised the wand, pointing it at the two men, her eyes filled with both terror and grim resolve. The dim yellow light swayed before their eyes. A flash of dazzling green erupted. Tobias Snape stopped moving. Eileen's face grew even whiter. She collapsed onto the floor, unmoving for a long while, staring blankly into the void. It seemed only after the last trace of warmth had fled that she finally parted her cracked lips to rasp, "Go upstairs to bed." Dragging his heavy body, Snape's numb hands clutched at the stair banister. Every step upward was a trial. As dusk sank into night, he sat alone in the darkness of his room. Before coming back, he had only wanted to find a reason never to return here again. When he opened the door, he had thought to teach Tobias a lesson. During the fight, all he had wanted was to hurt him. But in that instant, he thought Eileen's wand had been aimed at him. His head was a chaotic storm of thoughts. One moment, he heard the crackle of firecrackers at Spring Festival. Another, he saw the snow-dusted statue in Godric's Hollow at Christmas. He thought of a body collapsing backward from the astronomy tower at Hogwarts. He thought of the Malfoy family, huddled together amid the ruins of the final battle. He even thought of Riddle, staggering toward the orphanage doors on New Year's Eve. Snape did not know whether he had truly fallen asleep that night, or whether he had simply drifted in and out of a hollow daze. When he opened his eyes the next morning, his mind felt strangely clear, as if a layer of mist had finally lifted. For the first time in years. It seemed he was simply himself. On the bedside table, he saw his wand. After cleaning himself and putting his things in order, he hesitated before descending the stairs. The living room was spotless. The stains on the walls and floor were gone, leaving the house cleaner than his memory could recall, as though nothing had happened the night before. Eileen sat in her chair by the sunlight, mending clothes as usual. Her wand lay quietly at her side. Hearing the creak of the stairs, she looked up. Her hair appeared freshly combed. "I'll make you something to eat." "No, I'll do it myself." Seeing her stir to stand, Snape strode quickly toward the kitchen. "I mean it, I'll do it." He toasted a few slices of bread in the pan, cut some hard cheese, and carried the tray out. "Here, Mother, have some too." Eileen took a slice of toast and nibbled it in tiny bites. "You've grown fatter," she said, after looking at him carefully. Snape noticed the coarse, callous texture of her fingers, hands worn down by years of endless labor. "I had an uncle," Eileen suddenly said, "your great-uncle." When he did not respond, she continued, "Karen Prince, you never met him." "No, you don't need to look for him," Snape cut her off. "Once term begins, I'll speak to the headmaster, Dumbledore, and ask him to arrange a position for you at the school." "But..." "He'll agree, I'll make sure of it." "Karen died when you were 5. What?" In the morning light, her pale face seemed to gain a trace of color. She pressed on in one breath. "After I ran from home, took a sack of galleons and married Tobias, I lost all contact with Karen. Until the year you turned 5. A ministry official came and told me he had died. Karen had donated his magical instruments, his house, and some of his belongings to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. But in his will, he wrote, 'Though I cannot bring myself to acknowledge it, you are the last of the princes.' He left the Prince family vault in Gringotts to me." Snape frowned slightly. "All these years, you've never gone to see it." "No," Eileen said calmly. "Why not?" Snape asked in confusion. He had never even known his family had a vault at Gringotts. "He hated magic." This time, she said it in a normal tone. "Did he know about it?" Snape asked curiously. Eileen shook her head gently. "The ministry official came when he wasn't at home." Snape did not dwell on it. After all, he knew the Weasleys' vault was so barren the goblins could hold a dance inside it. And as for the Prince family, they weren't one of the sacred 28, nor any ancient pureblood house of renown. What could there really be to expect? Eileen seemed to read his thoughts. She said softly, "I think there should be some gold. Tomorrow we can go and see." "All right," Snape replied offhandedly. He picked up the empty tray in one hand and with the other, gently lifted the sewing from the table. "Stop working for now, rest a while." Chapter 7. A few mornings later, just before leaving the house, Snape watched as Eileen pried up a slightly loose floorboard in the sitting room and used magic to dig a hollow pit beneath it. "Not this one," she muttered under her breath, prodding at the soil and rubble with her wand. "Restore to original state." She repeated the process no less than 7 times before she finally uncovered a small golden key, dulled in color, from under the floorboards. After brushing it off, she tucked it carefully into her robes. Seeing this, Snape abandoned any expectations he might have had about the vault. "Come on, let's go." After being sidelong apparated by Eileen to the door of the leaky cauldron, Snape staggered, gasping for breath, and took quite a while to recover his bearings. "Are you all right?" Eileen looked down at him with concern. "You'll get used to the feeling with time." "I'm fine," Snape said, patting his ears. "Let's go in." Together, they walked through the pub and into Diagon Alley. This was Snape's first time stepping into that towering snow-white building, which rose high above the other shops along the alley. At the long counter, Eileen rapped lightly on the wood and addressed an idle goblin on the other side. "Hello, we'd like to access the Prince family vault." The goblin carefully inspected the small golden key Eileen handed him, then gave a short nod. "No problem, I'll have someone escort you to the vault. Ragnock." "Ragnock? Such coincidence." Snape's eyes fixed on the dark-skinned, long-fingered goblin striding toward them. "Wizard, I don't like the way you're staring." Ragnock's slanted black eyes glinted with disapproval as he looked at Snape. Snape quickly averted his gaze. He knew better than to believe this goblin possessed a forgiving nature, until he saw the vault and made it back above ground. There was no sense in provoking Ragnarok. Ragnarok led them out of the main hall, through a thick iron gate, and into a narrow stone passageway. Whistle! Ragnarok blew a sharp, piercing note. A cart came clattering along the tracks toward them at full speed. Once they had all climbed aboard, Ragnarok shoved a lever forward, and the cart shot ahead at once. Cold wind whipped into their faces. Soon they were racing along winding tunnels, plunging deeper into the earth. After leaving behind an underground lake whose ceiling was hung with massive stalactites and stalagmites, the cart eventually slowed and stopped before a door. Ragnarok dismounted, fitted the key into the lock, then pressed his palm flat upon the door. The vault entrance melted away, revealing a gaping opening. Snape craned his neck to peer inside. The sight made him suck in a sharp breath. Mountains of gold coins were piled high within. On the shelves in the corners stood bottles filled with potions, bundles of dried herbs, thick tomes, and rolls of parchment. And you called this, there should be some gold in there. Snape turned toward Eileen, motioning for her to look as well. The scene clearly stunned her too. Her mouth fell slightly open, she blinked hard, but no words came out. Snape exhaled long and slow. I think we'll never have to work another day in our lives. After filling 2 bulging bags with galleons, they boarded the cart again, which roared them back up to the surface. Let's go buy a few things next. Eileen glanced at the cuffs of Snape's robes, which revealed his wrists, and at the worn trainers peeking beneath the hem. You need some new robes. We can also buy next term's books ahead of time. No need. I'll wait until after my OWL results. Old textbooks aren't so bad, and I've written plenty of notes in them. Before stepping out of Gringotts, Snape hesitated, then said, Wait, let's exchange some for Muggle money. I want to buy some Muggle-made clothes and daily necessities. Daily necessities? Eileen asked, puzzled. Like shampoo. Snape knew the answer sounded strange. Wizards had far better alternatives. As expected, Eileen raised the obvious question. Why not buy Sleekyzy's hair potion? I don't like the smell, Snape replied stiffly, then added, It makes me a little sick. Then buy some for me too. Eileen handed him a pouch. Whatever you want, just go ahead and get it. After purchasing new robes at Madame Malkin's Robes for All Occasions, they strolled leisurely with ice cream cones from Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor. Eventually stopping outside the Quidditch Quality Supplies shop, which was crammed with people. Peering over the heads of children, Snape spotted a sleek broomstick displayed in the window. A sign beside it read, in elegant script, Nimbus 1500, experience the thrill of high-speed flight. Aerodynamic design, fine birch handle, polished with pure magic, combining speed and precision. Accelerates from a standstill to 60 miles per hour in just 10 seconds, with a top speed of 107 miles per hour. Your best partner on the pitch. No, I don't want that. Noticing Eileen's questioning look, Snape quickly swallowed a bite of ice cream. I don't play Quidditch. When they returned home, Snape dug out his old gobstones set from his trunk and set it on the wooden table downstairs. Want to play a few rounds? I remember reading in the Hogwarts library's Daily Prophet that you used to be captain of the school's gobstones team. It's been a long time since I touched this. Eileen's rough fingertips instinctively brushed across a small round stone. Come on, it'll pass the time. Snape sat across the table. Why were there so many things in the Prince vault? The stone he flicked missed, trembling pitifully on the board. Uncle Karen couldn't have saved all that. Eileen struck his quivering stone precisely. Her stone then sprayed a foul liquid triumphantly into Snape's face. Maybe our ancestors were wealthy. What is that stench? Snape wiped the sticky slime from his cheeks. But it really is surprising. Looking back on the past, I feel like I endured hardship for nothing. Before long, his entire body reeked of the foul odor. Throwing up his hands in defeat, Snape said, That's enough for today, I surrender. After washing up and returning to the sitting room, Snape suddenly realized there was no reason for Eileen to continue living here. Mother, why don't you move? Tintagel in Cornwall, Upper Flagley in Yorkshire, Ottery St, Catchpole in Devon, anywhere would do. How about moving to a wizarding community? I suppose I could, Eileen said after a moment's hesitation. Sometime soon, I'll look for land or a house. Good, once you move, just write to me, Snape said, then dashed out the door. I'll go buy you an owl. But how will you? The Night Bus. Chapter 8. Welcome to the Night Bus, an emergency transport for stranded witches and wizards. As long as you stick out your wand hand and board the bus, we can take you anywhere you want to go. My name is Todd Sumpak, and I'm your conductor. After handing Todd 11 sickles, Snape climbed onto the violently purple, triple-deck night bus. Not long after the bus started, bullets of rain began hammering against the windows with explosive force. Ernie, Snape shouted hoarsely, how much longer until we reach Diagon Alley? But the roar of wind and rain drowned out his voice. Ernie still gripped the steering wheel tightly, leaning forward, straining to see the blurred road ahead. So you know Ernie's name, I thought this was your first ride. Todd came down from the second deck, calling loudly to Snape. You're the last passenger today, I get to finish early. Once we drop you off, we're heading home. How many people before me? Snape asked. Oh, first we've got to take Mrs. Coppet to Glasgow, then the MacKinnon family to Dundee. MacKinnon. Hearing that familiar surname, Snape immediately thought of someone he knew. Curious, he asked, is there a Marlene MacKinnon? Without hesitation, Todd answered. If you mean a brown-haired girl about your age, I'd say yes. Their family's upstairs. Do you know them? Yes, we're Claw. A screech. A shrill screech of brakes cut him off. Snape grabbed a handrail, barely keeping himself from falling. Are you mad? Ernie stuck his head out of the driver's window despite the storm, shouting at a black-robed figure standing in the middle of the road. We're finished for the day. Before he could finish, a searing red flash shot toward him. Ernie froze, his mouth still open, then lost his balance and toppled out the window. Hey! Todd leapt to his feet, wand drawn, aiming at the figure in front of the bus. The next moment came with a hiss and a violent green light that followed the red. The windows shattered instantly. Bathed in an eerie green glow, Todd slammed backward into a brass-framed bed, crashed to the floor, and lay motionless. The bus door banged open. Through the howl of wind, a drenched figure climbed aboard. In the dim light, the hooded metal mask gleamed with a cruel sheen. Death Eater. Snape recognized them immediately. Lay down your weapons. We will not harm innocent wizards. A deep, icy voice spoke from behind the mask. Drawing a steady breath, Snape quietly tightened his grip on his wand beneath his robes. MacKinnon's come out. We need your assistance with something. No sooner had the words fallen than a racket of spellfare and fighting erupted from upstairs, followed by a woman's scream. Over a minute later, footsteps thudded down. A middle-aged man in a green-patterned dress descended sideways, tugging at the yellow scarf around his neck with one hand until it came loose and fell aside. With his wand pointed behind him, the MacKinnon family of 3 hung bound together, gagged and floating inches above the floor, drifting down the stairs under his control. This thing is disgusting. Next time you're wearing it. The cross-dressed Death Eater grumbled to his companion. Enough, we've got them, let's go back quickly. Wait, there's someone else here. The disguised Death Eater pointed toward Snape, who stood by the window. He saw my face. Just as Snape prepared to fight, the masked Death Eater spoke lightly. Oh, Macnair, I know him. Severus Snape, my son's classmate, and a member of the Slug Club. Why would you say my name out loud, Avery? Macnair snapped angrily. Hello, Severus. Old Avery's tone was almost cheerful as he stepped up to Snape. I've heard amusing things about you from my son. But this is just right. Since you are to be the Dark Lord's faithful servant, I'll give you a chance to pledge your loyalty early. He pointed his wand at the MacKinnons. Kill the girl, use the spell Bella taught you. Snape flicked his eyes sideways. Mr. MacKinnon's head drooped against his chest, blood still seeping from his temple. Mrs. MacKinnon and Marlene had their mouths gagged with coarse rope, their muffled moans barely escaping. Marlene's eyes brimmed with tears, pleading as they fixed on Snape. Kill her. Snape pulled his wand from his robes, his hand shaking, his face marked with panic and fear as he looked at old Avery. "But I've never successfully cast that spell. Can I even do it?" "Tell me your choice, do it or don't." Old Avery's cold reply ignored his question. "All right." Snape's voice trembled with fear as he slowly raised his wand. "Sectum Sempra." He hissed the incantation through clenched teeth, slashing the wand furiously across Avery's throat while throwing himself hard under the brass-framed bed. A fountain of blood sprayed from Avery's neck, spattering dark red across the air. His eyes bulged wide, brimming with disbelief and terror. His mouth opened, but only a faint rasp escaped. Avery's body staggered on the spot for a moment, then collapsed onto the floor with a heavy thud. "Avery!" McNair bellowed in fury. He swung his wand from the MacKinnons to Snape, curses flashing in crisscrossing streams of light. Snape rolled out from beneath the bed, firing spells wildly backward. The windows burst apart under the impact, shattering in a hail of sharp cracks, glass raining down like ice. Wind and storm flooded into the bus, whipping everything into chaos. Huddled behind the chair where Ernie had sat, Snape panted raggedly, McNair's spellfire pinning him down so hard he could barely lift his head. As his mind raced desperately for an escape, a sharp, echoing blast cut through the deadly standoff. Snape peeked cautiously out and saw a tall figure with streaks of gray in his hair suddenly appear in the bus. McNair barely had time to react before the newcomer's wand was leveled at him. Petrificus totalis. McNair's arms and legs snapped together, his whole body stiff as a board, and he fell flat on his back with a thud. Chapter 9. Although the man who appeared suddenly had an ordinary pair of eyes and an intact nose, Snape recognized him instantly from the long staff he carried, and from the thunk-thunk sound his steps made as he moved. "Alistair Moody." "I'm a student at Hogwarts." Snape quickly shouted at him. He raised his hands and slowly stood up, stepping out from behind the armchair. Moody did not lower his wand because of this. In his coarse, rasping voice he ordered, "Throw me your wand yourself, or I'll take it." After a few seconds' hesitation, under Moody's piercing gaze, Snape slowly turned his wand around, holding it backwards, and tossed it at Moody's feet. "Incarcerus." A thick rope like a giant snake shot through the air, binding Snape's body tightly, locking his arms against his sides. "Hey, I already gave up my wand." Snape protested helplessly, standing in place. Of course, he had no intention of making any move. He did not believe, without his wand and bound like this, that he could stand a chance against Moody. Moody ignored Snape's objection. Seeing Snape make no further movement, Moody turned with his uneven steps and freed the MacKinnons from their bindings with a spell. He raised his wand, pointing it at Mr. MacKinnon's chest, and muttered softly, "Renervate." The spell took effect, and Mr. MacKinnon stirred faintly. Mrs. MacKinnon and Marlene clapped their hands over their mouths in excitement. Mr. MacKinnon's puffy eyelids fluttered open. He blinked hard, confused, then his eyes widened in terror as he looked around. When he saw Mrs. MacKinnon and Marlene crouching safe in front of him, he let out a long sigh of relief. Mrs. MacKinnon carefully supported him, helping him sit down on a crooked bed. "What happened, MacKinnon?" Moody asked. "I came as soon as I got your signal." "Someone stopped the bus, saying they needed my help," Mr. MacKinnon said, still shaken. "Mrs. Coppet, no, McNair. He disguised himself as an old woman using polyjuice potion." I saw McNair's long gray hair shrinking shorter, his body getting taller and broader. Then he stunned me with a spell. "What did they need your help for?" Moody pressed. "And who stopped the bus?" Mr. MacKinnon muttered, "I don't know." "The one who stopped it was Avery, also a Death Eater," Snape added from the side. "He tried to make me kill Marlene." "Severus." Marlene seemed to have just noticed Snape's situation. She screamed, "He saved me." "Well, I just didn't kill you," Snape muttered slowly. You mean him?" Moody pointed at Snape, asking after Marlene's words. Seeing Marlene nod, Moody hobbled forward a few steps, leaned over Avery, and tore off his mask. Moody's cold eyes scanned the wound on Avery's neck. Then he frowned, studying Snape before turning back to Marlene. "He saved you." Yes, the Death Eater forced him to kill me, but he didn't, Marlene explained urgently. Moody picked up Snape's wand and with heavy steps walked up to him, staring into his eyes for a long moment. At last, he released the binding spell on Snape. Here, take it. Moody's expression seemed to soften slightly. He held out the wand. Sorry, I have to stay vigilant at all times. Yes, I know, constant vigilance. Snape took back his wand and slipped it into his robes. He rubbed his sore arms, where the ropes had dug in, and grumbled. So what do we do now? Leave here first. Moody glanced out into the pitch-dark night as he spoke. At the same time, he reached into his bulging traveling cloak and pulled out a curved flask. He opened it and took a long swig. Noticing Moody's action, Snape squinted at him a few times, then couldn't help but ask. Can I have a sip? Don't put your mouth on it. Moody glared at him and shoved the flask roughly into his hands. Kid, that request is disgusting. Moody's unexpected action left Snape momentarily at a loss. He hurriedly feigned clumsiness, tilting the flask so that a few drops of the clear, colorless liquid spilled onto the back of his hand. Oh, thanks but no, I was joking. Fine. Moody took the flask back and rapped his staff twice against the floor of the bus. He asked gruffly, Is the driver alive? We need to head to Hogsmeade. Ernie was attacked at the start. He fell outside the bus, Snape said. I'll check. Moody hobbled off the bus. Watching him disappear into the storm, a wild thought flashed through Snape's mind. Macnair had seen his face and knew his name. He might be sent to Azkaban, but one day, Voldemort could free his servants. When that day came, what would they do? What would happen to himself and to Eileen? Snape quietly drew his wand from his robes again. He lowered his head, staring at the unmoving Macnair lying in the carriage. Finally, he whispered, Sectum Sempra. Vida. Mr. MacKinnon heard the faint sound. What are you doing, Petrificus Toadellus? Snape's wand clattered to the ground. His body stiffened like a statue and crashed to the floor, immobile. What happened here? Moody returned to the night bus, supporting Ernie, his voice full of surprise. What's going on now? This boy, he attacked Macnair. Mr. MacKinnon knelt by Macnair, wand pointed at the wound. Apisky, Ferula, nothing works. Let me. Moody pushed him aside, but his own healing spells failed just as completely. He went to Snape, lowered his head and said, staring into his eyes, This wound was caused by dark magic. Leave him here for now. Moody turned his head toward Ernie. Are you all right? Can you still drive? Ernie gave no reply. Soaked to the skin, clothes plastered against his body, his breathing shuddered uncontrollably. Todd. Ernie called hoarsely, his voice breaking. Todd, Aya. He was already sobbing uncontrollably. Todd, what should I do? Today is Stan's birthday. He's only one. The wind howled into the bus as Ernie wept, his sobs endless. Chapter 10. Snape could not move a single part of his body. All he could do was lift his eyes toward the roof of the carriage, listening to the footsteps and voices around him. As he was thinking about how he should defend himself before the Wizengamot, and about how Sirius Black had escaped from Azkaban, there came a deafening bang, and the night bus suddenly started up. The bus accelerated so fast that his body slid a distance toward the rear of the vehicle. Mum, Severus is still lying on the floor. He heard Marlene's voice. Then he felt himself being lifted off the ground by magic and gently placed onto a bed. Lying on the feather mattress, he thought to himself that at least now he would no longer have to endure the annoying jolting against his back. Time slipped by almost unnoticed. Another deafening bang sounded, and the bed frame beneath Snape slid forward about a foot. They had reached Hogsmeade. Carried out of the night bus on his back, his eyes were filled with a wide expanse of starlit sky. Accompanied by the squelch of a wooden leg pulling free of the mud, and the clatter of footsteps striking cobblestones, they entered a dimly lit house. A familiar smell of goat hit Snape's nose. The Hog's Head. He guessed silently. Aberforth, it seems you got my message, Moody said gruffly. Is Albus here? Also, could you find a place for Ernie to rest properly? After a snort from someone's nose, Snape felt himself being lifted upward. When the creak of wooden steps beneath him ended, he then heard the knocking of a staff against a door. "Come in," it was Dumbledore's voice. "Good evening, Albus," Moody said. "Good evening, Alistair. Tell me what happened today," Dumbledore asked sternly. "And what has happened to this child?" Snape was lowered to the floor. He could hear something being dragged across the boards, producing a harsh scrape. Moody seemed to pull over a chair and sit heavily. "Better to let MacKinnon tell you. I only came after receiving his signal." So Mr. MacKinnon recounted everything he knew. Marlene added the details that had happened after he lost consciousness. "Are the bodies kept downstairs?" Dumbledore asked. They left the room. The place was quiet. After a while, Snape again heard the sound of footsteps. Someone returned to the room. A red flash swept past, and the spell binding him was lifted. He sat bolt upright, looked up at Dumbledore, and said urgently, "Professor, could you send a letter to my home? Just say that I ran into you at Diagon Alley, that you had something about school to discuss with me, and that I will be home later. Please." Dumbledore's bright blue eyes, magnified behind half-moon spectacles, studied Snape for a moment. Then he nodded, summoned an owl and pen and parchment with his wand. Moments later, the owl flew out the window into the pitch-dark night. "Could I have my wand back?" Snape hesitated briefly, then blurted it out. "No, but there is a spell that prevents conversations from being overheard, Muffliato. I suggest we use it." Dumbledore cast the spell with a wave of his hand, then lowered it and fixed his gaze on Snape. "Do you have something to tell me, Severus?" "Yes, Professor," Snape nodded. The night bus was stopped by old Avery. He stunned Ernie Prang and killed Todd Sumpac with the killing curse. Old Avery was a Death Eater. He was not under the Imperious Curse. He recognized me right away and tried to force me to use an unforgivable curse to kill Marlene. "Anything else?" Dumbledore asked. Snape hesitated a moment, then continued. "Slytherin has a little group called Walpurgis. They hold regular gatherings. At those, Death Eaters teach dark magic. It was Bellatrix Lestrange who taught the unforgivable curses." "Walpurgis," Dumbledore softly repeated the name. "Professor," Snape explained his confusion, "that was the name the Dark Lord, Voldemort gave to the Death Eaters in the early days. Later they stopped using it, and it was handed over to the student recruits." Someone nearby shivered audibly, as if that name alone made them struggle to breathe. "Do you know why the Death Eaters wanted MacKinnon?" Dumbledore asked calmly. Snape shook his head. "I don't. Does he have something special about him?" Dumbledore pressed a hand against the crooked bridge of his nose, clearly deep in thought. "Then it was you who killed those two." "No, Professor." Snape met Dumbledore's gaze without flinching. "It was two Death Eaters." Dumbledore rose and paced before the dark fireplace. "If the first was under duress, then why did you attack Macnair?" "This is war, Professor." Snape's answer was brief. "That is not enough to convince me not to hand you over to the Ministry at dawn." Snape drew a deep breath, thinking, "You've forced me to keep speaking." He decided to use Dumbledore's spear against Dumbledore's shield. "Do not pity the wicked, Professor. Pity more the innocents and those willing to fight for them. The arrival of Death Eaters always brings death. He pointed at the MacKinnons. What would have happened if they had been taken away? Without waiting for Dumbledore's answer, Snape went on. "There are many more out there who do not dare to say Voldemort's name. Their worst fear is to come home and see the dark mark swirling above their house, because they know what they will find inside. I am a member of Walpurgis. To Death Eaters, a traitor is more tempting than an enemy or an innocent. I have family too. I also fear going home to see the dark mark above it." He fixed his eyes firmly on Dumbledore's blue ones and said heavily, "Professor, I do not want to lose the family most important to me in the name of procedure, justice, or some so-called greater good. He will stand trial and be sent to Azkaban without a chance to harm your family," Dumbledore said, his voice carrying a slight rasp. A mocking smile curved Snape's lips. "Azkaban? You mean the prison guarded by Voldemort's natural allies?" There was a silence, then Dumbledore spoke again. Severus, sometimes change brings good results, but sometimes it does not. We may keep today's event secret, but I want you to consider your actions carefully and the path ahead of you. Thank you, Professor, I will. Then Snape deliberately asked, I used magic today, will that be a problem? Oh, you need not worry. The trace cannot identify which wizard specifically cast the spells, Dumbledore said. Snape nodded thoughtfully. One more thing. Another thought struck him suddenly. At dawn, could you ask Mr. Moody, or someone else, to take me to Diagon Alley and then send me home? I want to buy an owl. Chapter 11. We're here, goodbye. An old man with wiry, gray hair and beard spoke rather brusquely. Thank you, Mr. Aberforth, thank you very much. Snape steadied himself and expressed his gratitude repeatedly. He truly had not expected that the person who would bring him back to Spinner's End would be Aberforth. Watching Aberforth vanish with a faint pop, Snape carried a large birdcage in one hand and a box of owl nuts in the other, and started walking home. Bang! Just as Snape knocked the first time, the wooden door swung violently open. Eileen was standing just inside, worry written all over her face. Snape quickly lifted the cage in his hand and said, Look, this is the most beautiful horned owl in the whole of Aeolip's Owl Emporium. The owl, hearing the noise, stretched its head out from beneath its wing. It rustled its wings and hooted softly toward Eileen. Eileen took the cage, though a trace of worry still lingered in her expression. Are you all right? Last night I received a letter from Dumbledore, saying he had something to discuss with you. Oh, that, Snape said, setting the box of nuts on the table. I ran into him in Diagon Alley and we talked about future career choices. I still haven't decided what I'll do, so he wants me to think carefully about which NEWT subjects I should take next term. It got a little late afterwards, so I stayed the night at the Leaky Cauldron. He yawned repeatedly, but I didn't sleep very well. The bed boards were too hard. I need to go up and get some rest. See you later. Knock, knock, knock. Hearing a sound at the window, Snape looked up. An owl was tapping its sharp beak against the glass of the sitting room window. He quickly set down the trunk he had been packing, went over, and opened the window. The owl swooped inside, folded its wings, landed neatly on the wooden table, and elegantly lifted its right leg. Snape leaned closer and took a large square envelope from its claw. His name was written on it. Who sent the letter? Eileen asked. She held a small handful of owl nuts, offering them to the messenger to taste. Snape tore open the envelope and unfolded the parchment inside. Ah, my OWL results. Ordinary Wizarding Level Examination results. Passing grades, outstanding O, exceeds expectations E, acceptable A. Failing grades, poor P, dreadful D, troll T. Severus Snape's results. Astronomy, A, care of magical creatures, E. Charms, O, defense against the dark arts, O. Divination, E, ancient runes, O. Transfiguration, O, history of magic, P. Herbology, O, potions, O. He handed the parchment to Eileen and said, Only history of magic I failed, but I got 6 outstandings. I failed history of magic too. Eileen glanced down at Snape's report card and a smile spread across her face. Well done, that's wonderful. 9 OWLS passed. We should go out for a meal today, this deserves to be celebrated. In the following days, aside from flipping through a few old books he had brought back, Snape slowly packed his things. Eileen sometimes helped him, though more often during the day she would go out to the newly purchased house. But she would never tell Snape where it was, saying only that she wanted it to be a surprise. Just before the start of term, Eileen finally finished arranging the new home. Are you packed? Tomorrow we can move in. Eileen shut the door and smiled at Snape. Snape replied listlessly, I've been packed for ages. You still won't tell me the location. You'll see when we get there, you'll love it. We'll leave first thing in the morning, Eileen said. All right then, I'm going out for a walk. Snape decided to take another look around the area. Crossing the rust-streaked railings, he entered a playground bathed in the glow of sunset, a huge smokestack rising against the horizon in the distance. The playground was deserted. Weeds taller than his ankles sprouted through cracks in the asphalt. Among them were scattered weathered plastic bags and scraps of paper. 2 old swings hung silently in the middle of the playground. The seats had long since lost their color, and the wooden surfaces were covered with cracks. Only when the breeze passed gently did they make a faint creaking sound. Snape walked through the playground and then into a copse where a small river wound its way, letting his steps carry him forward. "Good evening, Severus." The greeting startled him awake. Without realizing it, he had walked to the Evans family's house. Good evening, Mr. Evans." Mr. Evans gave his car door a gentle push shut. He looked as though he had just returned home from work. "It's been a long time. You've changed a lot, Severus." "My Mr. Evans, is Lily home?" Snape asked. "You've come for her. She and her mother are away, but Petunia is at home," Mr. Evans said warmly. "Petunia?" Snape suddenly felt a desire to see her and asked, "May I see her?" "Of course, go on in. I'll go pick up something for you both to eat." Mr. Evans opened the door, and before Snape could refuse, drove off quickly in his car. From the doorway looking into the living room, he could see Petunia sitting on the sofa watching television. Snape called her name, "Petunia." She turned her head toward the door. When she saw it was Snape, she snapped off the television and sprang up from the sofa. "What are you doing here?" She shrieked in alarm, then her face twisted with disgust. "I'm sorry, I came to apologize for the past." Snape stopped in his tracks. "I don't need your apology." Petunia grabbed a book furiously and hurled it at him. Snape stood still, not dodging, only swaying slightly when the corner of the book struck his forehead. The pages fluttered, and a small cut opened on his temple, blood welling from the wound. A flicker of panic crossed Petunia's eyes. She retreated slightly, her clenched hands loosening unconsciously. "I'm sorry, if that makes you feel any better." Snape spoke calmly, though inwardly he smiled. If Petunia hadn't thrown that, today's visit would likely have had no effect. "Why didn't you dodge?" Petunia ran into the kitchen, pulled a roll of bandages from a cupboard, and flung it at Snape with force. "Thank you," Snape said lightly, pressing the bandage against the wound. "Don't worry, just a scratch." "I must apologize to you. Tomorrow I'm moving away from Cokeworth to somewhere far from here." "That has nothing to do with me." Petunia's tone was still sharp. "Yes, I agree. After all, I was a jerk in the past. I thought I was special, but really I was just a foolish boy. I hit your shoulder with a stick, and I spied on the letter Dumbledore sent you." Seeing Petunia's expression darken, he quickly added, "That was all my fault. I ignored the hurt it caused you. I'm sorry." The sound of a car engine hummed in the yard. Clutching his forehead, Snape hurried out of the house, calling back as he went, "I must go. I can't let Mr. Evans see this. If he asks, just say I went home. And Lily is not a freak. She is your sister." Hearing this, Petunia looked as though she had just swallowed an entire lemon. Chapter 12. The morning was cool and clear. Eileen took Snape by apparition to a breezy hillside. Wherever his eyes fell, there were green meadows and woods, and the beautiful scenery of the village of Ottery Catchpole. From the height, the village looked like clusters of toy houses, scattered like tiny dots among shafts of light spilling down through the clouds. "How is it, not bad, right?" Eileen asked. "It's wonderful," Snape said. "How did you think of building a house here?" "I couldn't find a suitable one in the village. Later, I heard that old Lovegood had a piece of land he hadn't sold for ages, so I went to buy it from him." Eileen turned around and pointed to the 2-story wooden house behind them. "He was delighted when he heard I wanted to buy it. Look, he even helped me build this house, only charged 50 more galleons." Lovegood, Snape was a little surprised. Why would he sell this land? "He said it was too close to people, and he didn't like that. Though I disagree," Eileen said with a hint of hesitation, "compared with that strange cylindrical house where he and his son live. This place does indeed seem a bit too ordinary." "Never mind, I like it here." Snape grinned. Since Luna hadn't been born yet, why should he care so much? The rest of the summer, Snape was busy with Eileen arranging the house and clearing the weed-choked garden. Although he had made it clear to Eileen that the trace would not identify exactly who had cast magic, that the Ministry of Magic relied on wizarding parents to supervise their children's use of magic at home. And although he had argued with her about it several times, Eileen still insisted he follow the rules. So he had no choice but to use his hands to turn every patch of soil and plant every little seedling. "Oh, I've had enough." Snape propped himself up on a spade, standing in the wide garden. "Mum, you should come and see." "What is it?" Eileen poked her head out from behind the window. A group of garden gnomes, with bald, potato-like big round heads, were shrugging their little shoulders as they slipped into the garden through the freshly planted hedges. The hedges hadn't had time to grow together, so for them it was effortless. Not just one or two, more and more of them. Snape pointed at the gnomes struggling to wedge their small bodies into the soil. "At this rate, all the cabbages we worked so hard to transplant will be ruined by them." He bent down and seized a cabbage seedling fiercely, and along with a burst of wild struggling, pulled out an ugly gnome. "Let me go, let me go." The gnome screeched, kicking and flailing with its calloused little feet. Amid the gnome's shrieks, Snape gripped it by the ankle, hung it upside down, then raised it above his head, leaned his body back, and with all his strength, gave it a violent swing. The gnome traced a graceful parabola through the air before tumbling and rolling down the hillside. "Severus," Eileen said in some surprise, "that must have been 50 feet. "What 50 feet?" Snape, irritated, pointed in the direction the gnome had rolled. "Look over there." Following his finger, Eileen saw more gnomes still scattered about, struggling to climb up the slope. Tracing back along their path, through a tall hedge and orchard, a crooked little house loomed faintly into view. Snape threw his spade onto the ground. "We need to pay them a visit." Knock, knock, knock. Eileen, carrying a box of freshly baked custard biscuits, knocked on the burrow's front door. "Bill, go open the door." "Mum, I can't, I'm busy." After a short while, a plump woman in a floral apron bustled to the door to let them in. "Hello there." The anger on Mrs. Weasley's face quickly shifted into a friendly smile. "Oh, Eileen, is this your child?" Eileen smiled and nodded. "Yes, this is Mrs. Weasley, Severus." "Hello, Mrs. Weasley," Snape said. "Thank you, Eileen." Mrs. Weasley accepted the box of biscuits happily and warmly invited them inside. "So you've moved here already?" "It's been a little while. We've been busy putting the house in order." Eileen sat down on a chair in the Burrows' sitting room, looking a bit apologetic. "We should have come to visit sooner." Watching Eileen hesitate endlessly, Snape couldn't help but speak directly to Mrs. Weasley. "Mrs. Weasley, the thing is, when we were tending our garden, we noticed gnomes migrating from here." He gestured at the burrow with his thumb. "Up the hill. Since our hedges haven't grown in yet, they've all slipped into our garden and started digging holes, so I thought." "Ah," Mrs. Weasley suddenly called out, "Bill, Charlie, come here." Two red-haired boys ran over, each holding several gnomes in their hands. One of them, slightly taller, had long red hair. Snape guessed he must be Bill. The other, sturdier boy was Charlie. "Mum, we're clearing gnomes just like you told us," Bill said impatiently. "Don't worry about those gnomes, leave them be for a few months," Mrs. Weasley told Bill and Charlie. "Take the day off. Go on now, let them go and wash your hands." They ran off again, their footsteps thudding away. "I'm terribly sorry," Eileen and Snape apologized repeatedly to Mrs. Weasley. "We troubled you and interrupted their work." "It's no trouble," Mrs. Weasley said gently. "Honestly, I'm nearly used to them. Arthur is too soft-hearted with them every time he drives them away." They're back again before long. While they were chatting casually, the sound of a baby crying suddenly came from one of the rooms inside. "Oh, Percy, he's awake." Mrs. Weasley gave them an apologetic smile, then turned and left the sitting room. After a while, she came back carrying a baby in her arms, softly humming a gentle tune. Little Percy gurgled constantly in her arms, his small hands stretching unconsciously toward the air as if trying to grab hold of something. Snape leaned closer for a look. Percy's little head tilted slightly, as though curiously observing the stranger before him. "You're so cute." Snape couldn't help tapping Percy's chubby little nose with his finger. He turned to Mrs. Weasley. "May I hold him?" "Of course." Mrs. Weasley demonstrated how to hold a baby properly. "You need to support his neck and head with one hand, and the other hand supports." Snape carefully cradled Percy, whispering joyfully to himself in a voice only he could hear. "Oh, you're surprisingly. adorable little Weasley. Chapter 13. A loud whistle sounded. I have to get on. Snape hurriedly said goodbye to Eileen, pulled his suitcase, and climbed aboard the deep crimson Hogwarts Express. Near the rear of the train, he found an empty compartment, shoved his trunk into a corner, then leaned out the window to wave to Eileen. Eileen was waving back at him. As the train gathered speed, she was left behind, her figure shrinking smaller and smaller in the thick smoke of the locomotive. Only when the train turned a corner did Snape pull himself back in and shut the window. Hi, Severus. The sliding door of the compartment opened, and Abbott walked in, flopping onto the seat opposite Snape. How was your summer holiday? Abbott said casually. I was bored to death. My dad forced me to read Born Noble, The Genealogy of Wizards. And I even had to take notes. Overly eventful, Snape answered with a grin. What do you mean? Abbott perked up with interest. Come on, tell me. Snape gave a little cough and said seriously, I went to fight against Valda. Don't say that name. Abbott shuddered, sat up straight in alarm, and hurriedly hushed Snape in a low, frightened voice. You asked me to tell you, Snape said, leaning back comfortably in his seat. Fear won't solve anything. What's gotten into you? Abbott said, half angry, half astonished. You didn't actually do anything dangerous, did you? Of course not, Snape replied calmly. I'm not capable of that, but refusing to say his name won't make him spare us, so why bother? If I had that kind of courage, would I be in the same dorm as you? Abbott glared at him. Let's just play wizard chess. As they played wizard chess, the Hogwarts Express sped northward. They raced through late summer and early autumn fields, the scenery outside growing more and more desolate. The sun climbed higher, and around 1 o'clock, the clattering noise of the trolley echoed down the corridor. A plump witch with a dimpled smile pushed the snack trolley to their compartment door and asked, Anything off the trolley, dears? This time it's on me. Snape jumped up, pulled a money pouch from his pocket, and dropped it heavily on the table. Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, licorice wands, cauldron cakes, 2 of each. He handed the witch a galleon, receiving 2 sickles in change, along with a heap of brightly wrapped treats. After the witch slid the door shut again, Abbott gave Snape a strange look, glancing from the bulging money pouch back to his friend. He opened his mouth as if to speak. That's right, I robbed Gringotts over the holiday. Snape cut him off first, blocking the question. Abbott rolled his eyes. When did you start being so ridiculous? Since I discovered your special feelings for Mary, Snape said, biting the head off a chocolate frog and grinning wickedly at Abbott. You're talking nonsense, Abbott said, eyes widening. How can you slander someone's reputation like that? What reputation? Snape ran his fingers through his hair. I saw you just now on the platform, smoothing your hair exactly like this as you walked toward her. I called to you, and you didn't even answer me. Abbott's face flushed red as he argued. That's just between friends. How is that anything special? He then launched into a string of lofty phrases, something about good friends being like 4-leaf clovers, and life without friends is like losing the sun. All of which made Snape chuckle uncontrollably, until the compartment was filled with cheerful laughter. As the journey continued, the sky gradually darkened. The lamps in the corridor and on the luggage racks flicked on. Snape glanced out the window and could faintly see Hogwarts, nestled among mountains and dense forests. The train seemed to be slowing down. We should change, we're almost there. He and Abbott removed their outer clothes and put on black robes. His robes just brushed the tops of his shoes. The train will arrive at Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage on board. The staff will deliver it to the school. The voice echoed through the train. Finally, the train pulled into Hogsmeade Station. With the throng of students in the corridor, they jostled toward the doors and stepped down onto a small, dark platform. First years this way. Snape saw the towering, broad figure of Hagrid. He was calling the first years over at one end of the platform. They would cross the lake in the traditional way. On the other path, at the other end of the platform, over 100 carriages were waiting for the older students. This time, the carriages were no longer drawn by nothing. The Strowls stood quietly in the deepening night, their pale, empty eyes glinting as they watched the approaching crowds. Though Snape had braced himself, the sight of them still startled him. They looked somewhat reptilian, their bodies stripped of flesh, though from the raised bones of their shoulders grew a pair of enormous black bat-like wings. Snape and Abbott climbed into a carriage and shut the door. Moments later, the wheels began to rattle and bump along the road. Hogwarts loomed closer and closer. Soon, the carriage lurched to a stop at the stone steps before the castle gates. They followed the stream of students up the steps, through the entrance hall, and into the grand Great Hall where the start-of-term feast was to be held. Stars sparkled across the enchanted ceiling. Candles floated above the tables, casting golden light over gleaming plates and goblets. Beside the Slytherin table sat a gaunt ghost. He wore shackles, his robe stained with silvery blood, his dull eyes staring blankly forward. "Hello, Baron. How did you end up covered in blood?" Snape sat down across from the bloody Baron. The ghost's gaze began to shift slowly, like the lens of a camera focusing. With a hoarse voice, he snarled at Snape, "Boy, that's none of your business." Then the bloody Baron drifted away, vanishing into the darkness that led to the dungeons. Snape stared thoughtfully at the departing figure, then turned his eyes toward the Ravenclaw table. There, he did not see the ghost of Ravenclaw Tower. Thinking back, in the past 5 years, he had only seen the Grey Lady a handful of times. She seemed to wander the castle very rarely. Snape was so absorbed in recalling the tragic entanglement between the Grey Lady and the bloody Baron that he even missed the sorting ceremony. It was only when Dumbledore cleared his throat to begin his speech that Snape snapped back to attention. Chapter 14. Welcome, our new students. Dumbledore rose to his feet. He spread his arms wide in a gesture of greeting, his face breaking into a radiant smile. And welcome back, our old friends. Now tuck in and enjoy your meal. Delicious dishes appeared out of thin air, filling the empty plates on the long tables. They feasted heartily. Before long, the golden platters cleared themselves, only to be refilled with fruit pies, chocolate cakes, orange puddings, and other desserts. Severus, I don't see Avery. Abbott, his mouth stuffed with food, mumbled unclearly, why isn't he at the start-of-term feast? On the other side of the table, Mulciber, Regulus, and young Crouch were whispering together. Snape could already guess the reason for Avery's absence, and that reason was caused by him. He answered Abbott vaguely, I don't know either, but it is a bit odd. Finally, even the desserts vanished, leaving the plates and goblets spotless once again, gleaming as if brand new. At that moment, Dumbledore stood up once more. The noise in the hall gradually died down. May I have your attention, please? Dumbledore beamed at the students. I must trouble you to listen to an old man's rambling words. I must remind you that students are strictly forbidden to enter the Forbidden Forest at the edge of the grounds. In addition, only students of 3rd year and above may visit Hogsmeade on weekends. More importantly, I am very pleased to welcome Professor Wilhelmina Grubblyplank, who is joining our staff this term. She will be teaching you the subject of defense against the dark arts. Grubblyplank. Snape couldn't help lifting his head to look toward the staff table. Sitting beside Dumbledore, an elderly witch stood up. She had a sharply jutting chin and neatly cropped gray-white hair. Snape remembered that in the original timeline, Professor Grubblyplank had once filled in for Hagrid as a substitute teacher for care of magical creatures. He had never expected that she would be teaching them defense against the dark arts this year. Could she be Dumbledore's emergency backup? Furthermore, as most of you in this hall already know, outside Hogwarts, a war is raging. Voldemort and his followers are still causing turmoil and slaughtering the innocent. The hall filled with waves of fearful breathing. Dumbledore waited a few seconds before continuing. The current situation is extremely dangerous. I urge all of you to take special care of your own safety and remain vigilant at all times. If you notice anything unusual or suspicious, report it immediately to a member of staff. Well then, the hour is late. Off to your dormitories. Rest well and be ready for classes tomorrow. Around the hall, chairs scraped, benches clattered, and the sound of movement echoed. The students rose and filed out of the great hall toward their dormitories. In the familiar dormitory beneath the lake, Snape still did not see any sign of Avery. Only Avery's bed stood bare, without a trunk beside it. His wardrobe, left ajar, held nothing but a few old textbooks from the previous term. Before falling asleep, Snape wondered if Avery had dropped out. Would he join the Death Eaters early? And if so, would that cause some unforeseen change to the future? The next morning at breakfast, the enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall was a clear azure, with a few wisps of white cloud drifting lazily across it. Today was course selection day. After they finished breakfast, they remained seated at the table, waiting. "Let me see what you picked," Abbott said, taking Snape's application form. "I need to make sure our choices line up. Otherwise, being the only Slytherin oddball in an entire class is hardly a pleasant thought." He made a few adjustments on his own form, then smiled. "Good thing you're here this year." "Bah," Snape spat at him in mock disgust. The process of confirming sixth-year schedules was more complicated than before. Each head of house had to verify that a student's OWL scores met the standard before approving continuation into the corresponding EWT-level courses. Before long, Professor Horace Slughorn waddled over from the staff table, his large belly preceding him. Potions OWL outstanding," Slughorn muttered, double-checking Snape's application against his marks. "You may continue in my advanced class. As for the others, let's see. Herbology, Transfiguration, Charms, and Defense against the Dark Arts outstanding. Care of magical creatures. Acceptable." "Very good, Snape. Perhaps you're thinking of becoming an Auror or a healer." "I haven't decided yet, sir. But I believe these subjects, especially potions, are a precise science and a most fascinating art. Worth our passion and continued study." Slughorn looked at Snape with some surprise, stroking his walrus-like silver mustache as though pondering something. "All right, next," he handed the schedule back to Snape. A few minutes later, Abbott's schedule was also confirmed. In addition to the 6 courses Snape had chosen, Abbott had also selected Muggle studies. "We've got no class now," Abbott said, glancing over his timetable. "First lesson isn't until 10. I'll head back to the common room for a bit." "What about you?" "You go ahead. I want to wander around alone. See you in class later." All summer long, Snape had been thinking about something very important, and he could hardly wait any longer to see it. He climbed the stairs up to the 8th floor of the castle, walked through the corridor, and came to a massive tapestry. The tapestry depicted the scene of Barnabas, the barmy attempting to teach trolls ballet. When the troll noticed Snape's arrival, it stopped pummeling the ballet instructor and turned to stare at him. Snape quickly ran to check both ends of the corridor, making sure no one else was nearby. Once certain he was unobserved, he went to the window at one end of the wall opposite the tapestry, then walked toward the tall vase at the other end. "I need a place to hide something. I need a place to hide something. I need a place to hide something." After repeating this 3 times, a smooth door appeared on the blank wall. Snape glanced around one last time to be sure, then carefully grasped the brass handle and pulled the door open. He slipped inside the room of requirement and closed the door. At once, the sounds of the castle, the birdsong, the echoes, vanished into silence. The place resembled a vast cathedral, with walls built from the clutter hidden by generations of Hogwarts students. Piles of broken furniture stacked to the ceiling, magical objects that had nearly lost their power, and filthy bottles filled with congealed potions stood in the heaps. Tattered hats, cloaks, thousands of books, even rusty swords, all were discarded here in a chaotic jumble. Chapter 15. Snape took a broken lamp from his school bag and tossed it casually into a conspicuous spot. That way, even if someone grew curious about why he had come here, he would still have a proper excuse. Then he walked through the shafts of light cast from the high windows, searching for a troll specimen. The diadem should be somewhere not far from it. Everywhere he looked, all he saw were piles upon piles of assorted junk. Snape couldn't help but wonder if Tom Riddle's mind had long since been damaged by splitting his soul. Otherwise, why would he ever believe that only he could enter this place? At last, he found the troll specimen. Beyond the specimen, down the aisle, he passed an old vanishing cabinet. "Wait." Snape stopped and turned to take another look at the cabinet. After a moment's thought, he drew his wand and took careful aim. "Reducto." With a loud crack like a bullet slicing through the air, the quiet wooden cabinet was ripped apart in an instant, wood chips and fragments flying in all directions. Snape bent down, scooped a few broken pieces into his bag, and clapped his hands in satisfaction. Well, that should make sure the vanishing cabinet is completely useless now. Not far from the cabinet's remains, his eyes fell upon a large, blistered wardrobe. It was somewhere near here. Using his wand, Snape sliced off part of a robe sleeve, then picked up a rusty longsword from the top of a junk pile with the cloth shielding his hand. He used the sword to dig through heap after heap, pulling out every object that could possibly be worn on one's head. Finally, amid a scattering of tattered headpieces, Snape saw a darkened, rust-stained diadem. Tiny words were engraved along its base. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure." The instant he read those words, a powerful impulse surged from the depths of his heart. He wanted to place Ravenclaw's diadem upon his head. He could feel clearly that doing so would grant him supreme wisdom and endless glory. His legs began to tremble, as though pulled by an invisible force, and he involuntarily sank to his knees before the diadem. He slowly reached out his hand. The moment his fingertips brushed the diadem, a current of pleasure shot through his whole body. His mind raced, his thoughts had never felt so sharp. On one side was a wild hunger for wisdom and power, on the other, his calm reason struggling desperately to resist. Just as the diadem was about to touch his head, Snape squeezed his eyes shut and, with every ounce of strength, flung it aside. "Damn it, what the hell was that?" he gasped heavily, unable to stop himself from swearing. Harry and the others didn't run into anything like this when they got hold of it. Could it be they only came into contact with the diadem after Fiendfire destroyed it? Snape strained to recall the original storyline. That must be it. Things went wrong the moment I read that inscription. In that case, I need to avoid that step. He unwrapped the sleeve from around the sword and flicked his wand. Wingardium Leviosa. The sleeve floated up from the ground, drifted gently down, and covered the ancient, faded diadem. But just as he was about to pick it up through the fabric, it struck him that this, too, carried enormous risk. Before the diadem was burned by Fiendfire, Harry didn't seem to have touched it either, so it wasn't only about reading the words. He used his wand to move the sleeve away again and tried casting several spells at the diadem, but nothing happened. Covering it once more, Snape found himself frowning, unsure what else to do. After standing there in thought for a while, he realized that for now the only choice was to hide it. Under his command, a variety of junk pieces spun into the air and settled one after another on top of the diadem. Soon, the third junk pile to the left of the vanishing cabinet's remains looked no different from the heaps around it. Snape pressed his ear to the door, listened for a while, then slung his bag onto his back, slipped out quietly, and glanced behind him as the door once again vanished into blank stone. Oh no. He glanced at his old wristwatch, then hurriedly bolted for the stairs. No, I'm going to be late for the first defense against the dark arts class. Outside the defense against the dark arts classroom, Snape skidded to a stop. He knocked lightly, interrupting Professor Grubblyplank's lecture. "Come in." He carefully pushed open the door and stepped inside. "Sorry I'm late, Professor, A hiss of jeering rose from one corner of the room. James Potter's grinned the broadest among them. Professor Grubblyplank shot a severe glare in that direction. "Name and house," she said stiffly, turning to Snape. "Severus Snape, Slytherin House." "This class began 5 minutes ago, Snape. I do not expect you to be late again. Now, take a seat." Snape slipped his bag from his shoulders, carried it in hand, and hunched down as he walked quietly to sit beside Abbott. "What happened to you?" Abbott whispered, noticing Snape's missing sleeve. "SHH," Snape gestured toward Professor Grubblyplank, who was using magic to display a set of illustrations. "I'll tell you later." "As I was saying," she continued, "you will soon step beyond the castle walls. The world outside Hogwarts is far more dangerous." With her wand, she pointed to the images, which showed people suffering in torment, hideous wounds, and twisted, deformed limbs. Among the dark arts, the 3 unforgivable curses are the most vile of all. She tapped several pictures firmly with her wand. To use even one of these spells on a human is enough to earn a life sentence in Azkaban. This witch, writhing and screaming in agony, has been struck by the Cruciatus curse. It causes unbearable pain. This wizard, lying still against the wall, was struck by the killing curse. Though he bears no wound, he is utterly and completely dead. As for the imperious curse, Professor Grubblyplank descended from the platform, pacing around the classroom. Its victims show almost no outward signs. But you will act under the caster's will. The caster could make you aim your wand at your own head, or force you to murder your own family with your own hands. She circled to the far side of the room, then walked back toward the front. You must understand fully what you may one day face. I expect you to give this class the utmost seriousness, not merely treat it as another exam subject. The classroom fell silent, as though every student had stopped breathing. All right, there is no need to be overly tense. Professor Grubblyplank stood at the lectern, facing the students. In the lessons to come, I will do my utmost to help you strengthen your ability to resist the dark arts. Chapter 16. Today we will learn an important defensive spell, as well as a practical casting technique. Who knows the advantage of casting silently? Professor Grubblyplank asked. Snape hesitated before raising his hand, but clearly someone had raised theirs faster. Very good, Miss Evans. Professor Grubblyplank inclined her head slightly toward Lily. It keeps your opponent from knowing what spell you're about to cast, Lily said. That gives you a split-second advantage and the element of surprise. An absolutely perfect answer, Professor Grubblyplank said. 5 points to Gryffindor. In real combat, even the slightest advantage can lead to a completely different outcome. And besides, this is one of the subjects emphasized on the NEWT exams. Next, we will study the shield charm. Then, pair up into groups of 2. One of you will attempt to curse the other, while the other will try to defend with Pratigo. Without saying a word. After the lecture on Pratigo was finished, Snape and Abbott paired off for practice. What were you doing just now? Abbott asked. I went over near the grounds. Snape decided not to tell him the truth. He lifted his left arm, got swiped by a hippogriff. Luckily it didn't hurt me. They seemed rather gentle, really. Abbott tried to hold it in, but let out a stifled laugh. You and Hagrid should have plenty to talk about. Quiet focus. Professor Grubblyplank had come over to inspect them. Snape and Abbott immediately closed their mouths and went back to practicing. Abbott's face turned red as he raised his wand, glaring intently at Snape. Bored from waiting for a spell that might never come, Snape couldn't help but think Abbott had just given him a reminder. It was time to find an opportunity to get in touch with Hagrid. Perhaps later, he might even have to borrow a few roosters from him to deal with the basilisk. That afternoon's potions class was no challenge at all for Snape. He didn't even need to consult the book, brewing the pale-colored finished potion with ease. Of course, if the prize had been one more vial of Felix Felicis, he wouldn't have minded demonstrating to Slughorn the 4 different brewing methods of Draught of Living Death. Your potion is also very well made, Slughorn said regretfully to Lily, but Severus's is still a touch superior. Snape took the small vial of golden liquid, held it up to the candlelight, and gave it a shake, then slipped it contentedly into an inner pocket of his robes. The frustrated expressions on the faces of James and Sirius gave him no small amount of satisfaction. When the bell rang, everyone packed up and headed out of the classroom. Wait a moment, Severus. Just as Snape was about to follow the stream of students out, Slughorn called him back. While fastening the golden clasp on his dragonhide briefcase, Slughorn said, "How about dinner with me Saturday evening? A small gathering. I've invited Regulus Black, Lily Evans, and a few others, as well as the famous Auror Fabian Prowett. Perhaps you've read about him and his brother Gideon in the Daily Prophet." Before Snape could reply, Slughorn's eyes fell on Abbott, who was waiting at the doorway. He gave him a slight bow. Of course, I very much hope Mr. Abbott will do me the honor of joining us as well. During the summer, I happened to see a photograph of you and your father on his desk. I must say, his acquisition of quality Quidditch supplies was quite a brilliant deal. Slughorn cheerfully pulled out 2 invitations tied with purple ribbon and handed them to Abbott and Snape. then tucked his briefcase under his arm and walked out of the dungeon classroom. "He's invited me before," Abbott said, as they climbed the staircase, crossed the entrance hall, and went to lunch. "I came up with all sorts of excuses to turn him down." "That's not the point," Snape said, sitting down at the Slytherin table with a strange expression. "Quality Quidditch supplies is your family's." "Oh, you mean the shop in Diagon Alley?" "Yes." Abbott spooned some vegetable salad onto his plate. "My father just acquired it. He's on good terms with Devlin Whitehorn, so now our shop can stock the latest Nimbus brooms as soon as they're released." "And you never thought to tell me? I actually argued with you about paying for snacks." Snape heaped a spoonful of meat sauce onto his own plate. "From now on, all the food on the train is your treat." "No problem, it's not like I'll ever run out of galleons," Abbott said lightly. "On the train back, I was going to ask whether that money bag was just your week's allowance." Screech, Snape's fork froze mid-stab, scraping loudly against his plate. He glared at Abbott. "All this food and you still can't keep your mouth shut." After eating his fill, Snape began thinking over what he ought to do next. To prevent his unusual identity from being discovered, he wanted to make his actions appear consistent, tying everything together step by step to look as reasonable as possible. Honestly, he didn't fully trust Dumbledore. After all, to achieve his goals, the wise old man had been willing to gamble not only Snape's life, but also the life of the boy who lived. And according to Dumbledore's arrangements in the original story, Snape would inherit the Elder Wand after killing him. Needless to say, that ending spoke for itself. Snape tossed his utensils aside. "Come on, let's go look around the trophy room." They walked briskly up the stairs, turned a few corners, and reached the 4th floor. Inside the trophy room, crystal display cases glittered in the slanting sunlight. Medals, trophies, shields, and statues gleamed silver and gold in the soft afterglow. "Look at this," Snape said, pointing at a display case in the corner. Inside was a dusty golden medal. "Here's a medal for special services to the school. T.M. Riddle, 1943. Abbott read the inscription. Why was he awarded this? "No idea," Snape shook his head. "Let's look at something else." They soon found Riddle's name again, on an old, faded medal for magical merit, and in the roll of past head boys. "This guy was amazing," Abbott said enviously. "If only I could be like him." "Then you'd better work for it," Snape said with mock encouragement. "Not me, though. If I could just become head boy next year, I'd be satisfied." "You're not even a prefect," Abbott said in surprise. "How could you be head boy?" "Is there any rule that says a non-prefect can't be head boy?" Snape headed toward the door of the trophy room. "If I win a medal for special services to the school, it wouldn't be too much to ask the headmaster for the head boy position." "Would it?" "There's nothing else here worth looking at. I'm going to the library to check what happened in 1943. Maybe I'll learn how that medal was earned." "Want to come with me?" Chapter 17. "No, I can't. I still have some things to do later." In the glow of the setting sun, Patrick Abbott's face seemed slightly flushed. After bidding Patrick farewell, Snape hurried toward the library on the 5th floor of Hogwarts Castle. In just over an hour, the library would be closing. "Good evening, Madam Pince." It took Snape quite some effort to find Madame Irma Pince, dusting in one of the narrow aisles between shelves. "What is it you need, child?" "I'd like to know where the Daily Prophet issues from 1940 to 1950 are kept," Snape said. "Follow me." Madame Pince tucked her feather duster under her arm and led Snape through the rows of shelves. At a remote corner of the library, Madame Pince pointed at a neatly stacked pile of newspapers. "Here they are, the Daily Prophet from the entire 1940s. Be sure to return them when you're finished, or else you know what will happen." Thanking her, Snape quickly hauled a stack of newspapers over to a desk and began flipping through the issues arranged by date. The light outside the windows had already grown dim. Candles protected by glass covers lit up on the desk beside him. Finally, in the Daily Prophet dated June 15, 1943, he found an article. "Mysterious Murder at Hogwarts. Chamber of Secrets Rumors Spread Panic." The investigation into the mysterious death at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry on June 13 is still ongoing. Reports suggest that several other students had previously been injured in similar mysterious attacks. Headmaster Armando Dippet stated that the victim died in a bizarre accident, dismissing the legend of the chamber's monster as pure nonsense. He also declared that security measures had been strengthened and that the school would make every effort to ensure student safety. However, one of the school governors, Cassius Malfoy, revealed that so far, every victim had been a Muggle-born witch or wizard. "I don't want to criticize the headmaster or the school's policies," Mr. Malfoy told this reporter, "but for the safety of all students. Unless the perpetrator of these attacks is caught, the board will consider closing the school if necessary." Reliable sources indicate that the Ministry of Magic has dispatched officials to Hogwarts to oversee the investigation. The Daily Prophet reminds all readers to remain vigilant about their own safety. May this poor girl rest in peace in another world. Snape turned to the following issues. In the June 22 issue of the Daily Prophet, he found the continuation of the story. After investigation, the culprit behind the Hogwarts serial attacks was revealed to be a giant spider. A fifth-year Slytherin student, for his extraordinary courage and wisdom, played a decisive role in resolving the matter and was awarded the medal for special services to the school. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Magic and school officials confirmed that the student responsible for setting off this incident was officially expelled from Hogwarts, and his wand destroyed on the spot. This was exactly the information Snape had been looking for. He secretly tore out several of the relevant newspaper pages and stuffed them inside his robes, then carefully stacked and returned the rest of the papers. At that moment, Madame Pince's magically amplified voice echoed through the library. "Closing time. Please pack your belongings and leave within 5 minutes." At exactly 8 o'clock, Madame Pince extinguished all the lights and drove the remaining students out of the library. The crowd flowing out was mostly Ravenclaw students. Among them, Snape spotted a small boy with a head of golden curls, Gilderoy Lockhart. Back in the dungeons, Snape read for a while in Practical Potion-Making Mastery, then went to bed. Until he drifted off into a hazy sleep, Patrick Abbott still had not returned. Later that week, in several potions classes, Slughorn was effusive in his praise of Snape's abilities. He said that in all his years of teaching, he had rarely encountered a student more naturally gifted at potion-making than Snape. So, after the 4th potions lesson, Snape asked Patrick to go on ahead while he deliberately lingered, slowly packing his school bag. At last, only he and Slughorn remained in the classroom. "Professor, I'm curious, what became of the more talented students you once taught? If I could meet one, that would be amazing." "Ah, I don't know where he is now," Slughorn said regretfully. "Many years ago, I tried to recommend him to the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. But he turned me down. I can't imagine why he chose to go work as a shop clerk at Borgin and Burke's. I haven't heard a word about him in years." "Borgin and Burke's?" Snape's eyes widened, his voice tinged with astonishment. "Isn't that a dark magic shop in Knockturn Alley?" "Yes, such a pity," Slughorn said as he finished tidying up and headed out the door. "Such a talented young man." "Well then, Severus, I'll see you Saturday. Remember to bring Patrick along." "Professor," Snape called after him, "what was his name?" "What? Oh yes, his name was Tom Riddle." On Saturday at noon, Snape shared his discoveries with Patrick. Although he didn't want to draw his friend into danger, some unexplainable impulse kept him from hiding the truth from Patrick. So just like you, Riddle was old Sluggy's favorite. Patrick, still bent over a parchment, titled The Principles of Ghost Manifestation, didn't even look up. "Keep your voice down." Snape quickly cut in, worried that even the name might bring Patrick trouble. "Do me a favor, as a friend, don't say his name." "All right. But it's not like..." "I know it's not that name, the one we can't say, but just treat this as my unreasonable request. From now on, call him Little Tom." Snape added. "After all, I don't need another rival on the way to becoming head boy." "Fine." Patrick didn't sound entirely convinced, but he agreed anyway. "Now hand me your essay, this is giving me a headache." Snape pulled a roll of parchment from his bag and passed it over, then bent his head to work on his own defense against the dark arts assignment. Free periods in 6th year were nothing like what Snape and Patrick had imagined, time to act freely as they pleased. Instead, almost all of it was consumed with trying to complete the massive piles of homework assigned by their teachers. Though everyone complained about the workload, every teacher insisted that their assignments only took a few hours, as if students could somehow use the same hours to finish multiple classes' work. By dinner time, Snape had only managed to complete about half of his tasks. "Maybe we should leave the rest for tomorrow," he set down his quill and said to Patrick. "Slughorn's party is about to start." Chapter 18. After grabbing a bite to eat in the Great Hall, the two of them set off toward Slughorn's office. This office was much larger than a typical teacher's room. Inside were 2 comfortable winged armchairs, with 6 or 7 smaller chairs arranged around them. Slughorn was holding a small glass of wine and chatting amiably with a red-haired wizard. "Welcome, my boys," Slughorn called warmly as soon as Snape and Patrick Abbott stepped inside. But from his posture and the gleam in his eyes, it was clear that it was Patrick he had most looked forward to seeing. Snape handed Slughorn a box of candied pineapple, purchased through the owl post. "Oh, thank you, Severus. Let me introduce you, this is the famous Auror Fabian Prewett. Gideon had work tonight and couldn't make it. Such a pity." The wizard standing beside Slughorn raised his glass to them in greeting. Snape noticed that on his left wrist he wore a gold watch. Its surface faintly scratched. The dial had no hands, only several stars moving across it. "Good evening, Mr. Prewett," Snape stepped forward to greet him. "I don't know why, but you remind me of Mrs. Molly Weasley. You look rather alike." "You know Molly?" Fabian's stern face broke into a smile. "She's my sister." "Ah, that explains it. During the summer holidays, I visited the Burrow with my mother. We met her and also little Percy. He's adorable." "That child will go far one day," Fabian said proudly. "Last time we saw him, he had his eyes wide open, listening intently to the ministry's wireless broadcast. And he was only a month old then." Snape fought to keep a straight face, restraining himself from laughing. He quickly covered it with a cough or two. Absolutely. Bill, Charlie, and Percy are all excellent children." While they were talking, more students arrived one after another. "Come, children, take your seats. Everyone's here now," Slughorn called, beckoning them to gather around him and Fabian. "Lily, sit here." Lily sat down on Slughorn's right. Between her and Snape sat Dirk Cresswell, a 5th-year Hufflepuff who was fluent in Gobbledegook, Mermish, and Troll among other languages. Lily glanced quickly to the side, then turned her head away. Slughorn reclined in his armchair, introducing Fabian Prewett's accomplishments. "It's not every day a hero like this comes to visit. If you have any questions about being an Auror or about the ministry, don't hesitate to ask him." Fabian rubbed his nose awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with such praise. Slughorn sipped his wine, while his other hand picked through the candied pineapple Snape had brought. "Children, when it comes to career choices, don't make foolish mistakes. I've always recommended joining the ministry. It's a most excellent and respectable path." He pointed his sugar-dusted finger at Snape. "Severus, you could become an Auror. Don't miss such a rare opportunity." "I'd be glad to welcome you for an internship with us next year," Fabian said with a smile. "As long as you choose the proper NEWT courses. Leave the rest to me." Thank you very much, Mr. Prewett." Snape expressed his gratitude repeatedly. Being an Auror seemed like a worthy option. "And you, Dirk," Slughorn turned to Dirk Cresswell. "With your command of Gobbledegook, you could easily work in the Goblin Liaison Office. I could introduce you to the head of the department. But stay far away from the Centaur Liaison Office. Do you know why?" "Professor, isn't that also a subdivision of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures?" Dirk looked a little puzzled. "I think Mr. Prewett can answer that better than I can." Slughorn chuckled and turned to Fabian. Fabian exchanged a smile with him. "Centaurs don't like talking with wizards. They'd sooner kick you than have a calm conversation. If you get sent to the Centaur Liaison Office, your first priority should be finding yourself a new job." Whether real or simply playing along, everyone burst into laughter. The rest of the evening was spent happily asking Fabian about the work of Aurors and the ministry, while Slughorn chimed in from the side. In many areas, especially gossip between departments, Slughorn knew even more than Fabian did. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock at the office door. Argus Filch marched in, clutching James Potter by the arm. "Professor Slughorn," Filch panted. The flesh on his chin wobbled as he spoke, and his bulging fish-like eyes gleamed with the mad light of a man who had caught a student in mischief. "I found this boy sneaking about outside your door. He claimed you'd invited him to this party, said he'd been delayed in setting out. Did you send him an invitation?" James wrenched his arm free of Filch's grip, looking furious. "Fine, I wasn't invited," he snapped. "I wanted to crash the party, happy now." "No, I'm not happy," Filch retorted, though his smug grin said otherwise. "You're in trouble, boy. Didn't the headmaster say no wandering at night without permission? Eh?" "Never mind, Argus, never mind," Slughorn waved his hand. "Wanting to attend a party is hardly a crime. Let's let it pass this time. Potter. You may stay." "I don't want to stay. Who'd want to be here with him?" James jabbed a finger at Snape, raising his voice. "Why does he get to be here?" "I believe I understand what Mr. Potter means," Snape sighed. "Perhaps he thinks that being in the same room with someone whose parents include a muggle is an insult to civility and breeding." I didn't," James sputtered in outrage. "You filthy Snivelus, how dare you twist my words like that?" Slughorn's brows knitted in displeasure. Snape drew a sharp breath, feigning shock at James's words. "My apologies, Mr. Potter. I never realized you held such deep prejudice against half-bloods and muggle-born wizards." "That's enough," Slughorn cut him off before James could argue further. He pointed to the door. "Argus, take him back to his dormitory." "No punishment," Filch muttered, both indignant and disappointed, as he dragged James away, grumbling under his breath. Even after the door had been shut for some time, they could still hear James's angry curses echoing in the corridor. Chapter 19. Snape knew perfectly well why James had shown up here. No doubt he had somehow found out that Snape would be attending this party. And that Lily would be here too. "That boy," Slughorn shook his head helplessly. "Never mind, it's late already. Time to go back, children, or else we'll all be in trouble." The little golden clock on his desk had already ticked past 10 o'clock. The students filed out in a line. Slughorn heaved himself up from his chair and accompanied Fabian down the stairs. Back at the dormitory, once again only the two of them were there. Who knew what Mulciber was up to? Lately he had been coming back very late. Patrick Abbott couldn't hold back. He gave Snape a big thumbs up. "I just witnessed something amazing. A Slytherin mocking Gryffindor for blood prejudice. Tusk, you said it so convincingly. It was terrifying. Don't slander me. Right now I am absolutely the most supportive person in the entire wizarding world when it comes to muggle-borns." Snape replied irritably, fluffing his pillow into a more comfortable shape. "Potter actually tried to come to the party this time. It's not as if old Slug hasn't invited him before." Patrick changed into his pajamas and climbed into bed. "Still, that party was really nothing special. I'm not going with you next time." "Suit yourself." Snape swung his legs up onto the bed, lay back on his pillow, and gazed at the rippling glimmers of light on the glass window as the lake water shifted outside. "Patrick, that poor girl who was killed more than 30 years ago, who do you think she was?" "How should I know?" Patrick yawned. "Then who do you think might know what really happened back then? After so many years? Besides a few of the old professors, who else would? Maybe you could just ask the headmaster yourself." "Wait," Patrick suddenly sat bolt upright, instantly wide awake. "Even if people have changed, the ghosts have always been here at Hogwarts." But then he flopped back down. "Forget your little Tom. How could you possibly use some 30-year-old story to earn a prize medal today? You never know. Besides, don't you think digging into old secrets is exciting?" Snape pulled the curtains around his four-poster bed closed. "We've got care of magical creatures in the morning. Good night." The next morning, Professor Sylvanus Kettleburn, the care of magical creatures teacher, led the small handful of students toward a crooked little shed at the edge of the grounds. "Come along, children." He was seated in a peculiar wooden chair that functioned somewhat like a muggle wheelchair, except this one had 4 short legs that walked forward in alternating steps. Back in third year, Kettleburn had complained to the students that if Dumbledore hadn't made this chair for him personally, he would have retired long ago.